Hey, Tom, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jay.
So I'm really excited to have you here because you are responsible for, along with a lot of other people I know, building a really amazing application online that's helped a lot of other people grow their business. So I won't steal that thunder from you. I'd love for you to talk about, the business that you run and started, what that looks like, how you help other businesses and entrepreneurs grow, and ultimately what made you start it in the first place. So just give us a little backstory on that.
Wide open here. I'll try not to talk for the next 45 minutes straight. So I started a company called Aweber, and the original name was around automated web assistant. It got shortened into Aweber. And what we do is we manage email newsletters and marketing automation for small businesses and content creators, et cetera, all around the world. So I started that back in 98. So it's been 22 years or so now. And we have a team of about 100, 110 people that up until March were all based in Pennsylvania. We're now scattered across 5 different states with all of the stuff that's going on with COVID. And we've also made the decision to go remote first. Which means we're hiring across the country and around the world as the opportunity presents itself. So kind of background, like how I started it, I describe it as kind of a happy accident, honestly, as I think a lot of interesting business ventures are. I was going to college for mechanical engineering. I was at Penn State, and I was selling wireless modems back when we were still connecting to the internet with dial-up, which makes me feel really old, but I'm not that old. So,
yeah, really.
Yeah. So some of us remember these things, others do not.
I remember having an old 2400 baud modem, which we don't refer to things in bauds anymore. But I remember like dialing into BBS services before the internet actually existed. And I probably should not have been allowed to do that at that age, but my parents didn't know what was going on. So anyway,
yeah, exactly. What they don't know can't hurt them. Yeah, so I was selling modems. So it was 19.2 kilobits per second back in the day when we were all still connecting it. 56K was pretty dominant then. And then you were starting to get DSL and cable modems and that sort of jazz. But most of the world still connected with dial-up. So to be able to do it wirelessly was like a big deal. So it was a company that was selling this hardware and then the monthly service to go along with it. And I was basically an independent rep, and I would go to computer shows and so forth to like introduce people to this technology. And I always had big lines, and like, it was a very novel thing. It seems kind of like passe now, since we all have high-speed internet in our pockets with our iPhones or Android or whatever it is. But like back then it was a really big deal.
Yeah.
I vividly remember like the demo being this big brick it was probably like the size of like maybe 3 phones, and I would Velcro it to the back of my laptop that I used for school, and it had a serial cable that would connect it in the back of it. But anyway, I won't bore you with all the details, but basically I got a lot of interest that way, and I would follow up with people manually via email afterwards, and I call them too and whatnot. But it was like, that was all a manual process. And while I was going to school, eventually I was like, hey, I can write a little program that would send some of these emails on a timed basis over, several days and weeks, and answer common questions. Like, because the emails that I sent, it was the same thing all the time. Everybody had the same questions, and you could you knew what people were going to ask. After you'd done a few of them, you just knew what the right cadence was. So I automated it. And since I was a rep in this company, there were also other reps in other parts of the country that were selling the same product. And because we weren't competitive with one another, because we all had our own kind of territory, I shared that program with a lot of them. And we would share tips on like the emails that would work and what didn't. So it was kind of a really good like learning exercise for myself. And I would improve the letters that I was using and then sharing out to everybody else as a result. And I ended up leaving the company to kind of focus on school because, that's kind of important. And in the process, a bunch of those folks that I had shared the program with, I stopped running the email follow-up program. And in the process, a bunch of them came to me and said, hey, like, I'll pay you for that. Can you keep running it? And I was like, I really want to do school. And it was like, it wasn't until after people started coming to me saying, hey, I left that company. I'm now doing this other thing. I'd really like that email thing. It worked really well. It saved me a lot of time. That something clicked and said, maybe there's a business there, and maybe that's something I could do. So I spent the spring semester and my summer trying to figure out how to launch it as kind of a generic thing that somebody could come in and put their own content into and send that out. This was back before you had PayPal and, the Stripes and so forth of the world. So like everything was the hard way.
Yeah.
As far as getting servers set up and websites set up and web designs and write the code and then process credit cards. And actually the first version of Aweber we launched, I accepted credit cards on the website, but I couldn't actually process them. Like it was as MVP, minimally viable product as possible. It wasn't even really technically viable because I had no way of actually collecting revenue.
Right.
But I collected credit cards for the first month, and it wasn't until the end of that first month that my merchant account was approved so that I could actually charge those customers for the services rendered. But and the rest is kind of history. So 22 years and, lots of team help and so forth along the way. And we've built something really cool, and we have about 100,000 users around the world that use our product every day. So it's really cool.
That is awesome. What a cool story. I remember those days so well. They're so vivid to me at that age because it was the same kind of time frame for me. So I started a basic little web design business in 1999, and it was horrible at the time. I think I made about $5,000 that whole year, but I was 17, so it really didn't matter.
That's a lot of money to a 17-year-old.
That's right. All I needed was gas and movies, and gas was a lot cheaper back then. So
Exactly.
It's funny to hear those stories, but also along the way, I can visualize, 22 years of business growth from just you and an idea to 100 people, from a couple of customers who couldn't even really pay you to 100,000 customers all over the world who expect service all the time. There's a lot of growth in there, and I have not grown a business to the scale that you have, but I can see those things that you probably experienced along the way. And there's people that are listening right now who are going, gosh, I just can't imagine getting to that point. And they're thinking, gosh, I don't even know how to deal with 10 team members, much less 100. So let's talk about teams, first of all, because I don't know why I want to go there, but I think it's just one of those things that was the hardest thing for me to learn along the way was how do I bring people along and get them excited about this idea, and how do I get them all to work together and care for each other and be happy enough to show up every day and want to be there. So in those early years, what did you learn as you started to build and develop teams of people?
Yeah, it's great question, great angle. It's challenging. I think the biggest kind of point of advice that I start with anything is start with one. So I ran the company myself for the first year and a half or so before I hired anyone. It was probably one of my biggest mistakes. Like looking back on the years, there's lots of mistakes, don't get me wrong. But that's as foundational as that is, I feel like that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made definitely early on, was not hiring sooner. And there was a big sense of responsibility that came with hiring that first person, because it then was bigger than just me. And it wasn't just like my livelihood and my ability to feed myself. But it was ultimately like their ability to feed themselves and, my ability to keep them employed and, keep revenue coming in the door and so forth. So like that felt like a big deal. And then it also, so there was that kind of bottleneck that I needed to get over in my head initially, but there was also just the logistical aspect of well, how do you actually hire someone? That was scary because it's I don't know how to do that. I've never done that before. big companies hire people, like not me, you know. And at that point I had a townhouse, and I was working out of there, and like, my next door neighbor was a retired judge, and I remember one time he asked me, he's like, what exactly do you do? Because you never leave, other than, I was big bike racing at the time. So like, he's like, you never leave other than on your bicycle. Like, I'm just really curious. You seem really normal, really cool and all, but like, you never leave. What do you do? And I remember explaining the whole process to him, and it was funny. But like, when I hired my first person, it was actually somebody I used to race bicycles with. And I told him, I was straight up with him. I was like, I've never hired someone before. This could go completely sideways, kind of full disclosure, like, this is what I'm looking at. And they were game for going on that ride, and it was really cool. And I don't regret a minute of it. And he would come to work actually every day, and I had a finished basement in my townhouse, like a walkout basement, and he'd come in the back door every day. The question from my neighbor got a little stranger after that, but it was all good. So he had more context then. So once I was like, yeah, this guy's cool if he comes over, he was like, no worries. Yeah, so that was scary, and at the end of the day, like, payroll was the biggest deal, and like, you can pay somebody to do that, and it was easy and it was cheap, and like, once I'd done it, it wasn't complicated anymore. And it just kind of iterated from there. I think with anything, it's just start with something. We talk about this in like the email world all the time, is like, people don't know what to write, and it's like, start with one paragraph to one person, and from there, it'll grow and elaborate from there. So the team management is tricky. So I forget, what was the other angle that you were asking for?
I mean, that's really it. I think it's helpful for people to know a couple of things in that, that you said. One is that it is scary, and that's normal. Like, it's okay if you feel that way, but at the same time, I love your advice there of like, just start with one. And then things that you don't know how to do, if you're good enough at the primary thing that you're able to generate revenue, you can eventually pay somebody to do those things, especially in today's world. I mean, talking about automation, I remember back in the day, payroll was a very different thing than it is now, and calculating taxes was very much complicated than it is now. Now we have these tools online that we can go to process payroll, and just everything's automated. Like, I don't sign a paycheck. It all just happens automatically. And so, I think that advice of like, hey, just start with one, just put one foot in front of the other, just try something. Because I think so many people, and that's one of my big worries right now. It's funny that I'm talking about worries and I'm about to transition to fear, is people are living in so much fear right now because there's so many unknowns in our world at the moment that it's scary. And I think, one of the greatest things about entrepreneurship is that willingness to go, I'm going to take a step into this room and it's a little dark and I'm not quite sure, but I'm just going to keep moving forward. So I just love that counsel.
Yeah, I say this to our team all the time, is like, if you're not doing something scary every day, you're doing the same thing you did before, and you're going to get the same results that you had before. In order to achieve results that are not typical or not average, you need to do things that other people aren't doing. And just that inherent change that comes with that is scary for most people. Like, it's scary for me, and I've been doing a lot of these things for a lot of years, but like, even now, like we mentioned before, I think before you started streaming, we've taken our whole team remote. We were all in an office together every day. And we had an awesome, phenomenal office. And then with all of the COVID that's going on, we decided to go remote because we needed to, and it was a safe thing to do. But we've actually, since May, decided to stay remote. And now we're in, we have team members in 5 different states. They're all kind of geographically based around Pennsylvania. But like, we have people in 5 different states already, and it's like, I know how to hire people in different states. That's not a big deal. But now it's like, okay, we have to hire people in different countries. Well, we don't have to, but we'd like to. Right. And it's like, okay, how do we do that? How do we scale that? What are the obligations that go along with that? And as a bigger company now, there's definitely more kind of legal compliance and sales tax and all that kind of jazz that you have to think about. It's like, the problem set is I need to figure out how to hire people. And it's literally the same problem I had 22 years ago. And we've hired lots of people since then, but it's a new, unique angle to an existing problem.
So let's talk about that idea of remote work a little bit more. And I know people listening probably like, well, you're interviewing the AWeber guy. Why don't you talk about email? We'll get there, people. So like, just trust me. We'll get to email. We'll get to automation. All this stuff matters. But I think that the reason that I love having these conversations with other business leaders and entrepreneurs is that a lot of the struggles and transitions are very similar regardless of industry, and even to some extent regardless of size. Now, things change depending on the size. I always say a 5-person business and a 50-person business. A 50-person business is not just a larger version of a 5. They're totally different businesses at that point, structurally and everything else. But there are certain things we all have to endure. So right now there's this big transition. I hate the word pivot, but that's the one everybody's using. We got to be willing to change and adapt. You do have a really cool office from all the photos that I've seen. You got like slides in there and core values on the wall and all kind of cool stuff. So what has that remote work adjustment taken for you guys, and what have you learned along the way to help make it work better for your teams?
It's been interesting. The change itself was scary. There was, and I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but there was a quote I heard not too long ago of like, make decisions that you can undo quickly. Make decisions that are hard to undo, like slowly. Yeah. And at the end of the day, for us, like the decision to go remote for COVID was really easy because everybody was doing it. It was the right thing to do. Yep. But the decision to stay remote was honestly not as hard as you might think because I can undo it. I still have an office to go to. Like, there's no one there right now. There hasn't been anyone there since March. Well, we have 1 or 2 people that are there. But, in the grand scheme of things, undoing that decision, as long as we still have space, is not a big deal. We just kind of say, hey, we're going back to the office now if something is dramatically not working. For us, as far as making the actual transition, being a technology company to begin with, like we were all pretty comfortable with using a lot of the tools and systems, processes, standards that we have in place to kind of like everyone knows kind of how things work. And we have a lot of documentation. Everything we do is digital. Like, the extent of the paper sitting on my desk for the most part is these little paper cutout thingies that we use in meetings that I swipe from somewhere there. I don't know if you can see it.
That's a good idea.
They're called Mermoticons. Somebody was talking about them on some thread that I saw somewhere, and they're awesome. And you print them out and you can hold them up, and it's like, it's the great, like, hey, if we're doing something and it's like, you need to give feedback without, you get 10 people on a call and you give feedback. They're great for that. So I think more than anything, the biggest things that we've had to adjust has been not having so many synchronous meetings and conversations and doing more through documentation and more in written form, and not in written form like in Slack, but like written documentation where somebody can get it in an email, process it over 24, 48 hour period, and then give their input back. We've made some really cool decisions and be able to move things along and kind of curated lists and ideas from all over the country, all over the company in ways that we couldn't have done synchronously, like in the office, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, the Basecamp guys are loving this because this is like their world. I mean, just like Jason Fried's, MO is this kind of stuff. So it's funny.
Yeah,
to see
they've
how
been
it's
remote
all
for a long
impacting.
time. So their team's actually smaller than ours, which is interesting. I didn't realize that until recently.
I think they have less. I think they only have about 50 or 50 or 60, something like that.
Something like that. I always thought they were much bigger than they actually were. But it's still a cool product though. But yeah, for us, it's been trying to get away from the synchronous conversations is probably the biggest thing. And also continuing to have the the like personal banter and like getting to know people and the relationships, it's particularly with new people that we've hired since then, has been probably the most difficult part because everybody else was coming into it with a certain set of relationships already built. Yeah. Whereas people that are remote, that started remote, like we don't have that. You don't have that like peer-to-peer. Like I don't sit down for lunch with them during the day.
Yeah.
It has to be more deliberate versus just kind of running into them in the hall and being like, hey, let's have lunch today, you know? So those sort of things I think have been the trickiest.
Yeah, it's interesting as we all adjust to those things. I mean, you know, for me, I was distributed for ages. Now we're very small. We're only 18 people on my team at our agency, but for a long time there was just a handful of us, you know, 5 or 6 of us for a long time, and it was great. But I just really believed in the remote work idea. Like I was a super, you know, asynchronous communication kind of person. Like I kind of followed that, you know, Basecamp MO of like, we don't do phone calls and meetings. We post things and deal with them later. But I almost pivoted too far, you know, in an instance where I lost relationships in some cases because I wasn't willing to pick up a phone. It wasn't that I wasn't willing to do it. It just seemed like a waste of time. And I didn't appreciate the nuance of some of those things. And I think now it's about trying to find that balance. And as much as like the technology's gotten so much better with something like Zoom compared to where we were maybe 10 years ago, it's still just not the same. Like it's not the same to like not be in person with people. And so then we kind of pivoted the opposite direction of being always in the office. You know, that's where we did work, and we went home and did home stuff. And that was great. And now we're trying to find this balance between the two where a couple people still come into the office. Most people are totally remote, you know, in the midst of everything going right now. But what is that balance moving forward? And I think, you know, what I'm hearing is like, the same thing we're all dealing with, which is we're just kind of figuring out as we go, and that's okay. And as long as that communication stays really fluid with the team, that's kind of what matters.
Yeah. I'm really conscious of the like part in office, part external office. Like with our team being in the office, 99% of our team was in the office pre-COVID. I was very deliberate. Like we had flexible hours and, you know, flexible work from home to some extent, but I was always very deliberate that we preferred to have people in the office there. And I believe it's very much kind of a one or the other kind of thing, that the two don't generally mix well, because what ends up happening is your people that are remote end up being kind of second-class citizens, and they get excluded from meetings, or it's like there's a group of 10 people in a room or 5 people in a room and they're all there together, but then there's like the 1 or 2 that are on the remote, and it's like there's only one camera for the 5 or 10 people that are in the room, and it's just a different kind of experience than when everybody's remote and everybody has an even playing field. But I think there's so we're very conscious of that, and at the same time like trying to be conscious of not recreating in office externally, because it just things need to work differently. And I think a lot of people's default is to just try to do what they were doing in the office remote, and that doesn't work. So just being very conscious of those kind of those changes.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about automation, because that is kind of like your world, right? One of the things I always say to people is they need to figure out as a task comes in or something they need to do, they need to decide, does it need to be done? And if not, let's throw it away. Number 2, can it be automated, which is what we'll focus on. Number 3, can it be delegated? And number 4, if I have to do it, does it have to be done now? And if not, let's schedule it on a calendar. So that's kind of how I think through task management. I probably stole that from somebody somewhere along the way.
I like that.
But the automation piece, you know, when we start talking about email, one thing I want to say to people in general, from a marketing perspective, that's what we do, is help people grow their businesses, is I still think a lot of people vastly undervalue the power of a strong email list. We spent so much time as a society talking about getting likes on our Facebook pages, and it turns out that an email that we have permission to email to is actually way more valuable than somebody liking our Facebook page. So for a company maybe who hasn't done email automation before, and they're going, hey, we just send out emails, occasionally we do a newsletter, they don't really have a plan, where should they start? What's a good starting place? I mean, obviously go sign up for a free trial, but you know what I mean? Like, we're like really as a business owner, what should that thought process be like for them on the email side of things?
I'd say don't sign up for a free trial. We actually just went freemium last week, so you can sign up for a free account.
Even better. That's even better.
No credit card, no time limits. Use it until you get value, and then hopefully you'll pass.
Even better.
Yeah, so my marketing director would kick my butt if I didn't mention that.
I'm glad you clarified. As soon as I said it, I actually knew that because I just read the copy on your homepage. But I was like, I'll let him
Yeah,
correct me.
no worries. So somebody starting out that hasn't done it before, just like hiring your first person, just start. Put the form on your website. Like I think a lot of people it's kind of this chicken and egg scenario of like, I don't know what to write. Well, how about you just put a form on your site and ask people to subscribe for updates? Just be really minimally, kind of look at it as an MVP, minimally viable, product, minimally viable newsletter, and see what happens. And I guarantee you, when you start getting a couple of subscribers, you can email them and say, hey, what would you find most valuable to hear from us on a regular basis? And they'll usually tell you. You'd be surprised. And then just write one email. It doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to look crazy. It doesn't need to have all kinds of crazy graphics and all that kind of stuff. Just write an email and write it like you're writing it to one person. So like, I'm going to send you an email. And I think that's one of the things that people, they make it into this big thing and that they need to like send these glossy, emails with lots of pictures and all that kind of stuff. And like our platform can certainly do that. We have tons of templates. We have tons of images. And there's lots of ways to come in, and we actually have a tool called Smart Designer that'll take like your brand and put it into a template with your logo and all that kind of stuff automatic. So we can do a lot of that sort of stuff for users. But at the end of the day, like you just write something really basic and start that connection with your audience, just like you would on Facebook, just like you would on Twitter. But remember, no matter how big your audience is, whether it's one person or it's 100,000 people, write like you're writing to one person.
Yes.
Because when you send the email and it's received, it's not somebody at a mic stand in a stadium speaking to 100,000 people simultaneously. It's like, I'm talking to you, Jay. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, yes. And I think that a lot of times when people write emails and they come across really impersonal is when you're writing to your audience, and not Jay. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it comes off differently, whether you're writing to your mom or your dad or your son or daughter or whoever it is. Like write the emails with that in mind, and with the like, what do they find interesting about it, or what are they going to get value from there? Mm-hmm. So I think, the other like new to email kind of mistake that I often see is people look at it as strictly a sales channel. And while it's extremely powerful for generating sales and generating revenue and so forth, it's a remarkable relationship builder, remarkable just value driver. So like I was talking to a friend of mine, he owns a business where they do like fire suppression and that sort of stuff for a lot of commercial buildings. And he's like, we haven't really been doing email. Our revenue's been impacted heavily due to COVID and like commercial places shutting down and so forth. And I was like, what can you send them that is valuable at this time? It's not like, hey, get your fire extinguishers inspected, get your, fire suppression water systems, sprinkler systems inspected. It's like, hey, what should I be thinking about if I have a vacant building right now? And it's like, get those checklists. And I'm sure, and he, as soon as I mentioned, he's like, oh yeah, we have those. And I was like, that's exactly what your users probably want to know right now. And it was so close to him that it was that far away. You know what I mean? And I think that instead of looking at it as directly a revenue thing, it's often like, how can you educate people? Like we use email automation to onboard new team members when they start with us internally. So like, just how do I train employees? I can throw a huge handbook at them, or I can send them a link to our Confluence space with all of our internal documentation, but it's like thousands of pages. Like what's most important for them to know on day one? What's most important for them to know on day 5?
I don't know why I don't do that. That's a great idea. Like this is why I love doing this podcast, because selfishly I get as much ideas as other people probably do, but like that's using email automation, especially to go, hey, we've developed this sequence of emails. We got somebody that's onboarding, and over the first, 2 months, we want them to get an email once a week or twice a week or every day even,
Yeah.
with a tip about the company, a piece of encouragement, something they may need to know, whatever those things are.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great idea that is. I have never, ever thought about using email that way. And it wouldn't be that hard to do, you know? Couple
Yeah,
things that you said,
absolutely.
a couple things you said there that I want to kind of reiterate to people and make sure that they heard. Number one is, if you're not sure what to ask, just ask your customers. Like, hey, what would you like to hear? What would be helpful? What would be valuable to you? It sounds like a silly idea, but just do that. And it's amazing because people will give you their opinion. If there's one thing people love to give, it's their opinion.
You might not like what they have to say, but you'll get it.
That's right. That's for sure. And then the other thing is that concept of writing to one email to one person is such a big deal, because I see so many people who they're trying to do what you're saying, which is speak into a megaphone, and they're not speaking to an individual. And that is just so important. And then last thing you talked about, you can design these really cool looking emails, and your platform does all that. And it is cool because I actually plugged my domain name in on your homepage, and it created some custom emails, which is pretty neat.
Cool.
But to kind of your point about writing in general, is that just writing a message, we've actually found that a lot of times just a good plain text email that you're writing to somebody that has intention and care for them can convert sometimes better than a really fancy high-end designed email, because it doesn't look like it's some kind of an advertisement or something you're trying to sell me. It looks like you're trying to communicate to me, and that's what email should be. Well, it can be both, I guess.
Absolutely.
How about one thing I'm curious about with a business like yours is competition. You started doing this work, I mean, basically when the internet started to some extent, and there weren't a lot of players in the game. And that has only increased more and more and more over time. Some have shown up and then disappeared, and you've lasted the test of time. There's still tons of competitors out there in this space, as there are for many of us in any space. How do you handle competition? How do you handle other things that are out there in the market? What's your leadership team especially? How do you all perceive competition, and how do you deal with it?
That's a great question, great angle. Competition in our space is pretty fierce. I'd say that there's a balance between paying attention and setting your own course. Because I've definitely seen many competitors come that just kind of try to do feature clones. And while you might compete and you might win some customers for some short period of time, you don't necessarily have the fundamental customer understanding and mojo to be able to move it along and build beyond just copying what everybody else is doing. And I think that shows in the product versus like actually understanding your users and connecting with your users and really being able to understand the problem sets that they're trying to solve. Competition, in the software space in general has only gotten tougher and tougher over the years. And I think that, you continue to have to drive more value each day. And I think that it's important to remember that, a lot of products have gone on to, go from like just email to like doing like a dozen other things. And at a certain point, it's like your customers come in and they don't really know what you do anymore. And we definitely win against some of those competitors on a regular basis because like they do so many things that they don't do any of them really well anymore. And people don't really know what they do. So they kind of are more focused on folks that are able to solve a specific problem with a specific value stream for them quickly and efficiently without a whole lot of other clutter and cruft. So I'd say, I think there's definitely a bias in many cases to where people want to expand and offer more and more features versus like honing existing features that you have to work better, more efficiently, faster, etc. To drive value that way than just adding on yet another thing that may or may not be actually valuable to your user base there, and a lot of them look at it as just drive additional revenue. And it's like at a certain point, it has an opposite effect because it just confuses people. So it's, it's definitely a balance. I would not say, we're certainly not super dominant in our space. But we're definitely up there. And I think that, a big part of why we've been around for so long is because we not only are providing a lot of value for our customers and solving real problems for them, but we're here as a partner in their business in being able to solve those problems with them and not just like treating our customers as kind of a number.
Yeah.
So like we're big believers in our customer solutions team. And we very specifically don't call them our customer support team, because it's not just like about the product support, it's about their business support and solving the problems that they have in their business. So like, like when we launched free 2 weeks ago, there's others in the market that where, their free plans are, you get email support for the first month, and then after that, good luck, you're on your own. Whereas we launched our free product with full email, full live chat, full phone support, and offer 24/7 for both our free users as well as our paid customers. Is that sustainable long term? I don't know. Right now it is, and we are absolutely look forward to and have helped some really great folks, solve remarkable problems in their businesses already that are even on our free plan that, haven't even necessarily converted to paid, that when they see the value of what they're doing with us, and when we've been able to point out like, hey, do you could also be doing this thing over here? The small fee that we charge every month is inconsequential, and they upgrade because of the value that they're getting from the solution. And that's only come by the way of us talking with them and understanding what their problems are and how we can provide more value there. And I think that's really key to being able to differentiate yourself in the long term. So
I'm curious how, over the years, because I think that what you're talking about, especially with software, is a big problem, because we do some software development as well. And we have clients that, their customer says, hey, one customer says, hey, we have to have this feature. And they go, we got to build this feature. I'm like, yeah, but, and now when you grow bigger and bigger, you just can't do that. Like you're going to destroy the entire thing. So I'm curious, over time, how have you had the discipline to remain focused enough on your core offering while still being innovative? So I guess if I were to shorten that question, it would be, how do you decide what to add? How do you decide what to change?
It's interesting. I'd like to say we have a really good formula for it, and we do definitely have a lot of like internal kind of policy procedure of like how we bubble up feature suggestions from our customers. A big part of that process is not just taking the feature suggestion and actually understanding what the problem is that the customer is trying to solve. So in the software world, that's a huge thing, because people ask for X feature and it's like, well, okay, what are you trying to solve? And they'll tell you, and it's like, yeah, that feature's not going to solve that. Just because I've heard about it enough from other people, and I know about what they're trying to do with it, or the angle they might be angling. It's like, nah, you can actually solve it with this thing over here. And by the way, that already exists, and let me show you how to do that. And they're like, they think you're magic because it's like you've already got this thing that solves their problem. So it's really understanding what the thing is that they're requesting, what the problem is that they're requesting a feature for, and then we use a back-end system using Jira, which is like a issue tracker system. And we actually tag specific accounts against kind of the feature problem set. User story, we call them user stories internally in the software world. Yep. So we're able to get kind of an approximate like kind of customer, the number of customers that have similar problems, as well as also some aspect of the the revenue that some of those customers are driving. And it's not to say that we only implement things that are coming from, our biggest customers' problems. It's not at all how it works. But it's a balance, like anything. And, we'll strategically pick off something that a lot of people request, but they might all be, smaller customers. But like we have the opportunity to help a whole bunch of people with that versus like, something that might be a problem for 2 or 3 bigger customers, but they might be spending a whole lot more money. So when you look at the overall value equation there, they might be similar groups. It's just one affects a lot more people than the other that might affect fewer. It's a balance. And we go through, so once we have the feature ideas or the problems that we're trying to look to solve, we go through kind of an estimation process of like how we might solve that problem, and then kind of the opportunity cost of like how long would it take to implement, which team's going to do it, what's their roadmap necessarily look like, because we have different engineering product teams internally that implement different parts of our product. So it's a matter of balance of being able to make sure that they all have something in their areas to be working on that is the most highly valuable. At the same time, we're also balancing in the things that people aren't asking for, but we think should be a part of the next, future iterations, because you're not always like, no one asked for an iPhone. I use this example all the time internally, and I'm certainly no Steve Jobs, but no one asked for an iPhone, but like it pretty much revolutionized how we use phones, and so you constantly have to be thinking about like, what are the things that people need that they're not asking for. So it's kind of a tricky balance. I'd like to say it was all formulated out and we had an exact science to it, but a lot of it's just experience. Hey, we tried that before, it didn't work, let's not iterate the same thing again. Because you get new people coming into the business that might not always have all the historical context behind it. I tend to be kind of the like history oracle of like, hey, we tried that 3 times, none of these 3 ways worked. If you got a 4th different way, like sure, let's try it, but like, I just want you to know where the bodies are.
That's right.
So we spend a lot of time talking about those sort of things, and I'm always trying to like write more of those down so they're accessible for other people to be able to hear. So
there's so many things there that are important. The last one there is really important, actually, for somebody who's a leader or a founder of an organization, especially as it scales, is if you're the one thing that the whole company is anchored in, if you're the only one that has that historical knowledge, there's a problem. And so one thing I always tell my team is like, whenever I'm out of town for a week, or this last case, I did 30 days in this RV trip with the kids. And I was like, look, when I come back, anywhere that you said, hey, we can't do this until Jay comes back, that's a problem. And we got to solve that. But I love what you were talking about not just listening to what the customer says, but actually getting to the root of what their real problem is and how you can actually help them. Because a lot of times, I think this is true in so many businesses, they'll ask for this thing, but that's not really what they want. They're trying to solve this over here, but they think that this thing's going to do it, and they just don't have enough experience or knowledge and whatever it is to know that that's probably not going to actually fix the problem. And I think listening and then thinking through those things and then applying historical context to it, all of that together. Because, you said earlier, you're talking about like really listening to customers and asking customers questions and hearing from customers. That's one thing, but there's also like a strategic reality of what are we going to do with that now? I think that I just love the way you kind of talk through that whole mix. I could talk to you all day because we're kind of, it seems like we're kind of cut from the same cloth, certainly the same like regions of time. I can visualize all these early years of the internet and all that kind of stuff. I love those things. But I want to transition a little bit because there's a couple things I always want to hit on. So as we kind of start getting towards the end of this conversation, there's 3 areas that I want to hit on, and we'll do one at a time. The first one is around work-life balance. I want to know what that even means to you and how that's changed through different seasons of your life. The second is it's going to be kind of parting advice. So as you think about speaking into the lives of other business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, what would you say to them about building a business that lasts? And the last one's going to be easy. In your case, where can they find you online? So let's start with the first one, work-life balance. That's an interesting term. It means something different to everybody. What does it mean to you, and how has it changed through different seasons of life, and what have you learned?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I work a lot. I'm not gonna lie and say that I work 4 hours a week or something like that. I'm not sure my wife would even want me to work 4 hours a week.
But I need you to leave now.
Yeah, it's like, you need to go away. So, and it was interesting when we went remote. She's like, I don't know if it's going to be good for us to be together all the time. And I was like,
I think a lot of people experience that.
Yeah, I know. It'll be interesting to see some divorce rates over time here. Hopefully people's relationships got stronger and not worse. I have 2 little kids, and I'd like to think that I have a good balance. We travel a fair amount, like you mentioned, traveling around the country and stuff with your family. I try to travel a fair amount as well. I try to make sure that I'm not that kind of single point of failure. I look at anytime that I am the single point of failure, it's my failure in my ability to delegate or disseminate whatever information, knowledge, document whatever it is that I need to do so that I'm not that single point of failure. I should be just as replaceable as anybody else in the business because, at the end of the day, anything could happen. I could not wake up tomorrow,
right.
And I want to make sure that our team and our customers are taken care of to be able to continue that mission forward. So that I think is really important to me. So, I'm a big snowboarder. I'm into, our AWeber's predominantly out of Pennsylvania up until recently. It's weird talking about this now being all remote. But I'm in New Hampshire at the moment, and my family and I, we have a place on a lake up here, and I spend all summer. And normally during normal times, we would have friends up here all summer, and we call it the Kulzer bed and breakfast, just with our friends kind of rotating through every week. And every week is a vacation for them, and it's I'm still working.
That's right.
Right. I'll go and play, they might be sitting around, on the lake during, for a couple hours while I'm having meetings, and then I'll jump up in between meetings and we'll go wakeboarding for 2 hours. And then I'll come back and I'll work a couple more hours, we'll go out and, go to dinner and watch the sunset and get ice cream on the boat and that kind of stuff. And so it's I kind of work that into my routine as far as the work-life balance. But, I've said this to many folks in the business world as well as personal. It's no one gets to the end of their career and says, wow, I wish I worked more. Simply no one. I love what I do. I love the customers that we work with. I love the ability for our team to have an impact worldwide, not only with our direct customers, but all of our customers, our customer subscribers. We're talking hundreds of millions of people, which is really, really pretty cool. Particularly now with just the dissemination of information and the ability to keep people safe and knowledgeable and so forth is so critical right now. That's what gets me to wake up every day and sit in front of the computer and help more people. So I think that balance, but at the same time, I'm highly cognizant of my kids are only going to be single digits for so long. I got a 10-year-old now, she's my oldest. And it's we're now entering the phase of life where she might not like me for much longer.
It happens.
So trying to take advantage of that time period, I think is really, really important. So, and you only get one opportunity at that. So take the opportunity to do that if you can.
Absolutely. And I always tell people too, if you're not in a place where you can do those things now, it's like what you're talking about earlier, just take one step towards it. I remember the days in the early years where I didn't take a day off. I just worked all the time, and that was okay because I liked it. And I in the earliest days, I wasn't married. Then I got married. We had no kids. That's all fine. And I think what I always say is you have to figure out what works for you. And just because Gary Vee wants to work 24/7, Monday through Friday, you don't have to, but maybe you do in the early years to get the thing off the ground. And just because somebody else tells you if you don't take 8 yoga breaks during the day, then you're not taking care of yourself, that's probably not true either. It's a matter of figuring out what works in the season. And for me right now, I remember intentionally going, you know what, I got to find a way to take a full week off of work and not touch the work, because the company wasn't in a position where it could do that. And it took me time to do that. And now, I'm so proud of my team because I just literally got back from a month-long RV trip. The first 2 weeks, I didn't touch anything. The second 2 weeks, I just checked in a couple of times, and it was just running really well. And that made me so proud of them. And it also empowers them. I think that's the thing that we miss, or can be missed, I should say, as leaders, is if we don't pull ourselves out of those positions and give other people the opportunity to fail, hopefully not catastrophically, but to make some missteps and learn along the way, then how are they going to ever grow? How are they going to ever have the opportunities that we had? And not everybody can start a business. I guess everybody could technically, but you know what I'm saying? I get really passionate about this stuff because I really love it. And it's a balance for me because I want to be married to the same woman my whole life. And I want kids who grow up and have a healthy relationship with both their parents. And I love the work that I do. And figuring out those things, I always say it's not really a balance, just a matter of like throwing it all in the blender. And some days you need a little more spinach and some days you need a little more sugar, and that's just how it is. So I love your perspective though. And I think it's really helpful. So how about parting thoughts? So as you're speaking into the lives of business owners, they're trying to make it work. We're all going through one of the craziest seasons all around that probably any of us have ever experienced. What would you tell them? What does it take to build a business that lasts?
I'd probably go a little kind of Baz Luhrmann on you, like, do one thing that scares you every day. Because if you're not a little nervous or scared or a little sweaty about something each day, you're doing the same thing you did before because it's comfortable, and that's not the thing that's going to probably get you to the next stage of whatever your growth is. The very nature of needing to change to reach a new level, implies that you need to change and do something new, and that's going to be scary. So do that, just do one thing each day. It doesn't really matter what it is. Just do something that's a little scary each day, because as you do it more, it then becomes normal. It's not scary anymore. And all of a sudden you're this overnight success, that happened after 10 or 20 years. So I think the media sensationalizes those sort of things, as like these instantaneous successes, and very often like leaves out the fact that like they've been toiling really hard for the last, 5, 10, 15 years before that, the public perception of the success actually happens. So just do that one thing.
I love that.
And you'll blink and it'll be 22 years later.
I like how Dave Ramsey says it. He says, I'm an overnight success. I busted my tail for 20 years and then I was an overnight success. And,
exactly.
But I really resonate with what you're saying about doing something that scares you. I always say I'm the least comfortable when I'm the most comfortable. And what I mean by that is that if I'm totally comfortable in all things, it makes me think, hold on, I'm either missing something or I'm not growing or I'm not learning. Doesn't mean we can't relax. It just means like there's so much opportunity in life and so many things to see. Do them.
Yeah.
Well, I think I know the answer to the next question, but the final question is, where can people find you online, find your product, learn more about you, and help grow their business?
Absolutely. So you can find us online at aweber.com. It's AWEBER.com. We're on all the social usual places on Twitter, et cetera, under the same handle. You can also reach me directly if you want. I'm really hard to find. I'm Tom K at aweber.com. Or if you mess that up in some way, I'm Tom at aweber.com as well. So, I love helping people worldwide. So, I don't hide from our users. So I look forward to hopefully hearing from a few of you.
Tom, it's been just such a pleasure to have you on the show today. I've enjoyed your stories. It gave me a lot of nostalgia thinking about the early years of the internet. And you guys have an amazing product. I have personally used it myself, and we have several clients that use it as well. And it really is good. So everybody out there that is thinking about email automation, go check out aweber.com. Go set up your freemium account, not a free trial. You can get a free account and enjoy that. Tom, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jay. It's been fun.
Hey, I hope this video has helped you with some tips and ideas to build a business that lasts. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on the next videos that we roll out. And more importantly, for some awesome free resources, head over to our website at buildingabusinessthatlasts.com. You can get a free copy of my book there where I tell you how I have built an agency that's grown year over year for the last 20 years in a row. So go grab that, buildingabusinessthatlasts.com, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks. We'll see you soon.